You'll see a red light. When you're done, just
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, for our first microphone meeting. It's terrifying on many levels. I see a couple new faces. I wanted to recognize and give them a chance to introduce themselves. For the record, I'm Brian Scarborough, chair of the committee, thanks to Mr. Smith over there being evasive. And so why don't we introduce ourselves on the way down? You first.
John Roberts.
Gina Master di Casa.
Carl Smith.
Carolyn Weber.
Jennifer Bowe.
Shane Andrew. Keith Burkett.
And I'm Alex Rella, CFO.
Stephen Van.
Jackie Johnson.
All right, the minutes were disseminated by email. Hopefully everybody had a chance to get a look at those. Are there any questions, amendments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Any questions? Do I hear a second? Second. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Great, minutes are adopted. Mr. Shane Andrews, superintendent update, please.
Yes, sir. So we'll start with the facilities update. It's pretty brief today. Mrs. Nguyen was unable to join us, but we're moving right along with our Westwood Middle School redevelopment project. As you know, in our last meeting, we discussed some contamination that we had to address. That was addressed. We're still on track for our proposed completion date. So the remediation occurred. It certainly could have been worse, and so we're thankful that it wasn't. And we're on course for that. You might have seen April 24th, we did the wall raising there at Westwood. You've probably seen that tilt wall construction go straight up over a couple of days. So that was pretty exciting. The kids got to see it. I think they had a live feed into the classrooms. And so the students were, it was like we were at a ball game when you look down the PE line there closer to 34th Street. The kids were up on the fences, looking over the fences, watching all this happening. So that was kind of cool to see that occur. So moving right along with that, we're still targeting opening on August of the 24-25 school year. So the Littlewood Castaldi, as you know, it's still in review, but we've moved forward with the process, and Harvard Jolly was selected as the architect firm moving forward with this project. Last week, I went to some community meetings. I actually went to the staff and faculty meeting. Then I went out to our hippie graduation, so I wasn't at the community stakeholder meeting that evening. But our team held the meeting at 5:30 as well there. So last week, we had both a design input meeting with faculty and staff as well as community stakeholders at Littlewood. So we're off and running with that project too. And as we all know here, but just as a reminder for those that might be tuned in for the first time, we're going to be moving Littlewood to the transition campus the summer of '24. We've already done some pre-work, so we've gone in and our team's looking at some of the changes and some of the work that they can do in advance, so we don't have to do it all next summer when it comes to changes needed for our K-5 students that aren't the same as our 6-8. So we're trying to be proactive on that with our team. So I think that covers most of it with our sales tax projects. We also know, we mentioned last time, we've closed out the sales tax funds that y'all approved years ago for the $50,000 for all the schools. And one thing that's not mentioned in here, just to keep you up to speed, the Castaldi for the review process for the old Terwilliger is recommending that, well, that has been submitted to the state, and it's my understanding that they're approving the removal of all of the buildings at Old Terwilliger. So that's in process too, and I'm sure Ms. Wynn could give us more updates on that in August, but it sounds like they've given us approval there. So I think all of that will be necessary for consideration by the board as we move forward with planning, rezoning, and all of the things that we have ahead of us, priority lists and everything like that. Couple other items of mention. In the minutes you saw, spot rezoning was brought up at the last meeting. Well, since then, we've changed to comprehensive rezoning. The spot rezoning target date was August of '23, which would have been this starting school year. That is now August of '24-25, and that's more of a comprehensive rezoning, looking at all K-12 schools. And so that process is ongoing, and we've kicked off the strategic planning process. We're in the envisioning phase, and we have some more work. The envisioning phase, we hope to be pretty much wrapped up by June 26th, 27th, and then moving into the planning phase, which we hope to have wrapped up by September 30th this fall. And then we'll start implementing, hopefully, right at the start of the new year, at the end of, right before Christmas and starting the new year, we hope to start implementing. As you know, it takes a long time to start the implementation, but start doing some things so we can get some work started in the 24 second part of the school year and end of the 24-25 next school year. And then it's an ongoing, we know the strategic planning isn't a one-time deal. We'll have an intense review starting in January of 2025, January 31st. So our plan is to keep the firm on that's helping us with this and to go through that process and the continuous improvement process and the evaluation and build capacity here within our team and bandwidth as well. So that's where we're at with that particular work. And let me see if there's something else we mentioned. The question came up, what is happening to the old Terwilliger property? That's why I mentioned the Castaldi. But as far as what we're going to do has not been determined. But certainly we're looking at that demolition as being part of some future work, which, as you all know, it costs a lot more to demolish than build. So I think that does it for my updates right now, unless you had any questions.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Superintendent, given that overview, what's the earliest that we would see any kind of rezoning impacts?
So the rezoning impacts would be to begin August of 2024, next school year, not this upcoming one. So that would be a year and 2 months, 3 months. August 10th of 2024 is when that would take place. So on the rezoning, just to mention, we're in that process. We're going to have an update from Ms. Johnson coming, but we've completed our community meetings. The end date for rezoning for the second reading to the school board is November 7th. So we hope to have that wrapped up prior to magnet season and all of those things that we'd want in place for the start of the 24-25 school year. And then we'll have a little bit more thorough update when Ms. Johnson presents that to us. Yes, ma'am.
Schools now on. When you-
Oh. Oh, okay. Okay, all right, sorry.
Any questions for the superintendent? Yes.
I just have a general, statement. I don't know what you're gonna do with zoning, but presumably there will be some implications to how the half-cent tax money is spent based on rezoning. You may decide to prioritize projects or do something different. You may or may not, I don't know, but I guess I'm just asking staff to keep that in mind, make sure this committee doesn't get skipped in those processes and decisions, and we're brought on board just to make sure that money's spent the way the community would like it to be spent, I guess.
Perfect, thank you. So without further ado, Jackie Johnson on rezoning.
Thank you, sir.
Fun topic that I'm sure
you, sir.
you guys are excited about.
And full disclosure, I am pinch hitting for Suzanne Wynn, who normally presents this, but I am familiar with the material, so I think we should be in good shape. But if you all have any questions that I can't answer, we'll certainly get the information when she gets back a little bit later this week. We'll pass it along to Jamar so he can share it with the entire group. But let's start first by talking about why are we doing a comprehensive rezoning. The last time we rezoned the entire district, all schools, was in 1983. A lot has happened in the last 40 years. A lot of changes that affect our attendance, obviously population growth, new development, migration within the county, obviously a lot of movement from east to west, and school choice options. So we've got more students moving not in the schools to which they are zoned because of magnet programs, charters, vouchers, and with some new legislation that has just passed, we expect that that will grow perhaps exponentially in the next few years. So we have 20 of our 36 schools are currently overcrowded, which we define as 90% over capacity. We have 4,800 empty seats district-wide, and that includes our vacant schools. Those are Prairie View Elementary School, which, as you may recall, was used as a swing school when Idlewild was being redeveloped. We have Duval Elementary School, which is now being rented out by a variety of community groups. And then, of course, we have what we're calling Old Terwilliger. What that means is that our facilities and the operating funds that we need to run our facilities are being used a lot less effectively than they should be, which means we have less money for teaching and learning. The question has constantly come up on, well, why not just go ahead and build more space? As you know, new construction is extremely expensive, and our facilities funding is limited. You are probably more familiar than most with the state limitations on new construction, and with the state limitations on knocking things down that already exist to make way for new construction. So that is an issue. The strain on our core facilities. A lot of people don't recognize, just go ahead and keep adding portables. Well, portables are also expensive, and even moving portables that you already have are expensive. But even if you just add more temporary space, the problem is that your core facilities, your cafeteria, your hallways, your media centers, your auditoriums, whatever, are serving a lot more students than they were designed for, which means you have kids starting lunch at 9:30, 9:45 in the morning. You've got much more crowded hallways, which is a problem. Even people getting into the school in the morning and in the afternoon, that's much more crowded and can create some hazards, so that's an issue. And then we just have some schools where they just don't have the space or the infrastructure to add new construction. And they've run out of room even for portables. So those are some of the key factors that limit us as to just building onto existing campuses. So this table shows our enrollment figures as of March 10th, 2023. These numbers will be updated as the team gets into creating new zone lines and new maps in earnest. I want to stress that there are none yet. The process up until now has been to get public input and not go in with any preconceived notions, not go in with any maps or drawings. So these are the figures again from March 10th, and what they show is the enrollment and the capacity and how far over or under capacity we actually are. So obviously everything in red, although it looks more like pink, is over capacity. Norton is right there. They're about the only elementary school we have that's just about where they should be, and the schools in green are under-enrolled. What that shows is that we've got more than 2,500 empty elementary school seats district-wide. Now that includes the empty seats at Duval, Prairie View, and Old Terwilliger, which pretty soon will have no seats if we end up knocking the whole thing down. And then, but it's actually 942 empty seats if you exclude the capacity at the vacant schools. Right now, there are no current plans to transition those vacant sites back to traditional schools, but that could change. And we do anticipate that during the strategic planning process, facilities will be part of that discussion as we're doing strategic planning. So that could certainly change. And I do want to point out that the High Springs population includes elementary and middle school students. That, of course, is a combined school. So that is our elementary. For middle schools, same type of figures. That shows that we have 1,355 empty middle school seats district-wide. There are no vacant schools at either the middle or high school level, so that's why there is no breakdown that way. And just a reminder that Oakview Middle School, that includes students in grades 5 through 8. Newberry Elementary School is way over capacity even without the fifth graders, because ideally we'd have the fifth graders at Newberry Elementary School. They just don't have the space, so for the past several years, those students have been at Oakview Middle School. Not an ideal situation, but it's the only place for them right now. And at the high school level, 940 empty high school seats district-wide. Hawthorne is a combined school, 6 through 12. And keep in mind that our Professional Academies magnet at Lofton is a school of choice, which means it has no geographic attendance zone. Everybody who goes there has chosen to go there. They aren't zoned to that particular school. Special centers, they won't be affected by rezoning. That's Aquin Jones and our Sidney Lanier School, but we just wanted to make sure that people knew that there are students that attend those schools. And particularly for Aquin Jones, kids go in and out. So they may be at a traditional school and then they go to Aquin, or they may be at Aquin and then they go back to a traditional school. So there are some variations throughout the year. This is essentially the same information, but in a map form. So you can see the green area is where we're mostly under-enrolled, and the red area, pink area, is where we are over-enrolled. Same situation, or same kind of idea for our middle schools, and then again for our high schools. So it's basically the same information that's in the chart, but just in a map. What this map shows is it gives you a little bit better idea of where the kids are. So you will see the dots. It's hard to see it on the screen, which is why we tried to get it onto a piece of paper. But that basically shows you where kids are. And so the darker the black dots, that's more kids, a higher density of students. And on the elementary chart, what you can see is how many kids are enrolled at the schools versus how many are actually zoned for the schools. So kids who are zoned for the school may not be enrolled at the school because they're going to a charter school, they're in a magnet program, they may be going to a private school. So there are a number of reasons, or they may be homeschooled. So there are a number of reasons that kids may actually be zoned for a particular school, but they're not going there. So you can imagine what would happen if all those kids suddenly showed back up again. We would definitely have some issues. And you can see the same thing for our middle school population and our high school population. But obviously, you take a look at the dots, and where are they? They're in western part of the county. The next set of maps shows active development, and that is defined as either currently under construction or scheduled to begin construction within the next 3 years. This is information that Suzanne Wynn gets from all of our local governments. It is constantly being updated. But again, what that shows you is how many more kids we are expecting at the schools in each one of those categories. So elementary, you can see that chart in blue, shows you how many more kids we are expecting. And you can see the dots in blue. Bigger dots, we're expecting more kids. And you can see most of those dots, again, western Gainesville, western Alachua County. Same thing for the middle schools. Same thing for the high schools. And there is, I can't remember, there is a particular multiplier. I think it's called a student multiplier. I can't remember exactly the terminology that Suzanne uses for that, but there is a specific formula that they use to determine how many students will be generated by either a single-family housing or multifamily housing, and that varies from elementary to middle to high school. I believe it's 12 for elementary students, 9 for middle school students, and 6 for high school students for single-family homes. That's how many students, and that formula changes usually every 2 years. They update that formula. But this chart, you can see the number of seats that are expected based on those that are active, again, within the next 3 years. This doesn't include all the kids that may be coming 5, 10, 20 years from now. So it's a good number of kids, and it's all, of course, focused in West Gainesville. We have already held 5 community input sessions across the county to get input from families and other citizens, including students, about rezoning. And again, we did stress to them that nothing's been drawn. We do anticipate having, well, I'll get to that in just a moment, but we did hear some common themes. And those formed the basis of the frequently asked questions handout you all have. There are a few more questions on the FAQ located on the rezoning website. But we wanted something that was summarized most of the most common questions we got on a one-page handout. But there are a few more questions that we cover, again, on the website. This is the meeting schedule for district-wide rezoning beginning in the fall. Well, actually, one of them starts May 31st. The decision was just made to add another school board workshop coming up next week. 2 topics for that particular workshop, both rezoning and the district budget. The plan is for proposed, and again, I stress proposed, maps and zone lines to be presented to the school board and to the community on August 16th. At a school board workshop. And then for the following 2 months, we will begin, again, take the show on the road and be sharing the maps and the zone lines with the community and getting their input. It hasn't been determined yet whether there will be one proposal, multiple proposals. In the past, it's been multiple proposals, but I don't think that's been absolutely decided yet. September 19th, we will have what's called the first reading, which is part of a three-step process for adopting a new policy, which our zone lines are actually part of policy. We will have a public hearing at 4 p.m. on October 17th, and as Mr. Andrews said, the plan is for the board to vote on a final plan on November 7th. Now, keep in mind, all public meetings, including the workshops, they are open to the public, and there is public input. So people are not limited to just the community meetings. They can provide their input at those school board meetings and at regular school board meetings, even if rezoning is not on the agenda. There is that opportunity. We do anticipate that there will be other ways for people to provide their input. We'll formalize that right now. And again, let me, before I get to that, I do want to reiterate that the new attendance zones will take effect for the 2024-25 school year. So that gives us a good 8, 9, 10 months to plan. We've got more information on rezoning, and we're constantly updating on our website, sbac.edu/rezoning. That includes video and presentations of all of the public input sessions that have been held so far, along with the workshops that the board has held so far. And we will keep updating that. Ultimately, the maps and the zone lines will be posted there as well. And we have set up a special email box that is at rezoning@gm.sbac.edu, and we are encouraging folks to submit their input there. And that is a box that is checked by the staff who are actually going to be responsible for drawing the lines, and it's also accessible to the board members so that they can see what the public has to say about rezoning. So that is all the information I have, but I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions anybody has, and if I can't answer them, we'll get the answers from Suzanne.
I had a question off the bat, and this is purely, how you going to do it? I suspect that due to the changes at the state level relative to, school choice and vouchers and whatnot, that there will be some migration of existing populations to other options.
Yes.
When do you all get the first bite of the data, I guess, relative to, here's what enrollment looks like for the August 23 school year? When do you see that to where it's creditable for the first time?
So starting with our 10-day counts, we're going to have to base, in August we'll do counts. We're going to base some of our thought processes off of that. The vouchers will roll out this summer. When do we get our first official data load from the state is in October when we do survey 2 at that time. So that's when we get our first FTE run, when it comes from our student download to them and then getting it back. So, but we will be doing the student counts that first week. We go no more than 10 days, but we get head counts from the schools, and we try to reconcile that with what we have in Skyward and work diligently to do that.
Obviously stating the obvious relative to, the rules changed, as they always do in the spring here in sunny Florida. This year markedly so. But the only concern, first thing looking at that timeline, is you're saying November, that's it, man, and you're going to be getting data 30 days in advance. You might draw lines to present to the public before you have that data, and that data could be meaningful relative to people scooting about. So, again, not stating what I'm sure has already occurred to our professional board members and staff, but that was the only thing that jumped off the page to me.
And then, like you said, beyond the vouchers, then comes the opening of a new charter school the fall of 24-25. Right now, I think the cap on that right now is 400, what came out of the legislature. We know with Santa Fe, they're opening up their charter school this year, 75 students. The following year, the 24-25, it'll be 75 more, so then they'll be at 150, possibly pulled, right? And then with the new charter school. And that's not including the vouchers and, what could be there. I think and we don't know of other charter schools that may come online or people that are working to do that right now.
Yes, sir.
On page 7, you mentioned that the specialty centers would not be impacted. Have we made a declaration there, or are we giving the strategic planning committee the opportunity to look at the system and then make those kinds of decisions?
Well, it's just that those are unique schools. They, like Lofton, don't have attendance zones. They don't have geographic attendance zones. For those of you who are not familiar, Sidney Lanier is our school for students with profound disabilities that cannot be served in a traditional school, and A. Quinn Jones is for students with significant disciplinary issues that are not succeeding in a traditional classroom. So there is more in and out at A. Quinn than there is at Lanier. And Lanier is a K-12 program, but students come from all over the district for those schools. And they have, particularly Lanier, they have very specific infrastructure design and setup to serve the very unique population that they have. So right now, I don't think there are any plans to change how those students, the attendance for those particular programs.
Was it may not change, but the location, we may decide that Duval may be the best place for one of those specialty programs and use that facility for a new X. And that's what I said, are we going to honor the process and let us guide us there? Or are we going to declare up front that the specialty centers could remain the specialty?
Yeah, that could certainly come up during the strategic planning process, absolutely. But again, you have to consider the unique needs of those students and how the facilities are designed to meet the unique needs of those students as well. Size, obviously, they're significantly smaller than most of our schools, so, yeah.
Are the Westwood numbers based on what your projected capacity is going to be once the construction's completed?
No. Yes, actually it is. I believe the capacity we are anticipating is 1112. I will have to confirm that, but I'm almost certain that is the case, and same thing, yes, in Westwood, yes.
On Littlewood, I was wondering sort of the same thing.
Let me check
I'm
what we have.
assuming that's current capacity, but I guess my question is are we addressing capacity at all?
The planned capacity for Littlewood is going to be 750. And right now, they have, I think as of when we had the community input session a couple of days ago, the current population was 715. Again, these are back to March, but these are being updated in the next couple of weeks so that as the team starts working on maps, they have more up-to-date information. But what do we have down for Littlewood? Yeah, no, Littlewood's capacity is not, the planned capacity is not reflected. And I do want to stress, this is permanent capacity. This does not include portables. We are not including portables.
Right, that's what I was going to say, is the 719 they have there are in portables. The new 750 number will be without any portables, but that's the difference in capacity we see. So really, if it was rezoned exactly as it is now, they'd only have 31 extra seats with the new build. Yes, sir.
I have a question, yeah. So in looking at the elementary, for an example, and I'm looking at the pink area, it would seem to me that the most movement would be in the schools that are far over the 100%. I mean, is the idea that you try to keep kids at their school, if at all possible, or you just, move?
It's a balancing act. And keep in mind, there's always a domino effect. You move kids from one school, and then you have to make to another school, and then you have to make space at that school. So that is certainly one of the considerations, but it's not the only one. And I will point out that we do have currently in policy a grandfather rule that says if your child is about to enter the final grade in that particular school, they can remain. So if they're going to be a senior or a fourth grader at Newberry, or depending on how the grades are set up at a particular school, they can stay. Now, that doesn't work for siblings. Right now in policy, that does not include siblings. It's only the child themselves. So, but that is currently in policy.
So one last question. If you looked at the magnet programs and you moved some of those programs, the entire program, to another school, would that be a possibility that could, instead of moving a lot of kids, just look at the kids that are in the magnet and move the magnet, because they're already a group within themselves. They know each other. They've been going to school together. They have relationships with each other. And so you just move the magnet and leave the other kids there. Has that been thought of?
The board has actually had a workshop, I think it was last month, and talked about magnet programs, and that's an issue that has come up during the community input sessions. I think that's going to be a subject of ongoing discussions because there are other things to consider. Transportation is an issue. Also, much like with Sidney Lanier, for example, you've got some programs that it'd be really hard to move them. The culinary arts program at Eastside, no way could you move that program. And that is true for some other programs. They have unique facilities needs. So, but that certainly has been a topic of discussion, and I can't say that a majority of the board has made any sort of final decision on that yet, or even decided when they're going to decide. But so that is certainly under discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions relative to rezoning?
My question was also kind of related to magnets. Karen asks it a different way, but my question was going to be, is the approach to the rezoning, and I know you just said the board hasn't really made any final decisions yet, but if they decide to keep the magnets where they are in place, will they cap the attendance what it is now and use that in modeling? Because I think you would want to glue that number so you know what you're working with.
Yes.
But
Still under discussion.
yeah.
Yeah.
Turn it off. Well, let me just say, on behalf of this committee, I'm really glad rezoning doesn't fall under our purview.
I'll bet.
And a lot of people look forward to the summer as a time of rest, and that is not going to be your program, my friends. So, of course, we'll keep an eye on it, given the implications to what we are charged with, which is making sure these funds are spent as intended. That is the best segue into the financial information. Mr. Rella.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity, as always, to present the financial information. Of course, it's the main primary role of this oversight committee, and I just wanted to appreciate your service. It's obviously the pay is pretty low, but I think honestly it's so very important. I sit on a few of these committees, and it's just so valuable to have folks with different takes, folks with incredible amount of knowledge in terms of what we're doing. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Jumping in, so the first page 2, is an update on tax receipts. So we've received, I think since our last meeting, we've received the December tax deposit, which was $2.1 million, in January, which was just under 1.7. Obviously, with the December month, that tends to be our biggest sales tax receipt month for reasons that you guys would understand. So the total revenue for this fiscal year, $60.2 million. Our balance forward at the end of the previous fiscal year was 49 million. And we've obviously discussed that, we had a lot of projects that were spinning out. We had the big bond that was issued in May of 2020, and those projects are completed, and we continue to spend down that balance. As of last Monday, I believe, when I pulled this information together, we had total expenditures and encumbrances for this year of 44 million, so an estimated fund balance is kind of like a snapshot, if you will, a little over 20.8 million. And if there's any questions as I go through this, I kind of done it so many times, but I know there's could be stuff that comes up, so you just shoot those questions to me. So the next page is kind of like a budget to actual on revenue. As we've discussed in this committee, when we shut down the economy, which is completely unprecedented in March 13th of 2020, that had pretty significant impacts on our tax receipts in terms of projected versus actual. So you can see for the 19-20 year, we received $2.5 million less than we anticipated. And from there, we've seen the recovery of the economy. Obviously, Florida's booming right now. It's a place a lot of people want to be, and they're bringing their tax dollars here, which we appreciate. So for the 2020-21 fiscal year, we beat our projection. For last fiscal year, we beat our projection by 3.7 million. And for this year, obviously, things are looking really good for this fiscal year. And we have, every September, the EDR, the Department of Demographic and Economic Research, provides us with anticipated tax receipts with all the brains they have up there, looking at trends and looking at our local economy, and that's projected to be up significantly again this year, so that's certainly good. And I think the intent of this slide, when I originally pulled it together, I think it was a committee request really, was to look at the post-recovery from COVID. Are we receiving what we anticipated, and kind of looking, in a short period of time, but thinking down the road in terms of where we're going to be at, year 5, year 10, et cetera, over the full 12-year referendum. So at this point, we're beating our projection month by month, month over month, year over year. So that's certainly good news for those that are here to see this thing through. So overall, beating the projection by 3.7 million for the duration. So moving on, some additional financial exhibits. The first is the half penny by projects, and we've transitioned from expenditure or from revenues to expenditures. So now we're looking at the project level data, and you can see we have this kind of broken out by projects for debt service, new construction projects, which is kind of like a holding account, if you will. And you can see some of the big 3, big 4, big 5, I forget how many there were. I think there was 5 ultimately. Some of those projects for elementary school I, which is New Terwilliger, Metcalf, Bishop, Idlewild, some have 0 balances, some have very small balances, but we've spent down those bond funds, and we're gearing up with Westwood redevelopment. Is for anybody that's driven by there or got to see the wall raising, which is like, for me, like a modern miracle. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. Really exciting to see that. But we have some additional items, project budgets for the Westwood redevelopment phase 2 in smaller odds and ends. So this is looking at like a high level view of the overall projects. And as we transition into the rest, we get into a little bit more detail where you can see the financial, the revised budget, activity, requisitions, purchase orders, at the project level, but also looking at the object level, which kind of tells us what we're purchasing. So for example, the debt service piece, we service our debt. It was a $110 million bond issue. So we obviously have a redemption of principal and an interest component that we pay every year, around $12 million. And then moving into some of the construction projects that are underway and wrapping, elementary school I, Metcalf, those have 0 balances. We do have small POs that are still open that will close, I'm sure, this fiscal year. Hopefully receive the invoices, or if the invoices aren't coming, close those out. And there's obviously, multiple pages, a ton of stuff. I'll just kind of go through it quickly if you guys have questions. Similarly, with Idlewild, that facility's been inhabited for 10 months now, so the balance on that is going down. Oakview, I think, is completed but not inhabited or not being used at this moment. But we continue to spend down that budget. And the Westwood redevelopment, you can see we've got building and fixed equipment, inventory equipment, computer equipment, et cetera, all the things necessary to redevelop that school. And obviously significant amount budgeted, not as much spent, but you can see the purchase order for Scorpio, the 27 million. That's the construction, well, not construction management, the hard bid we did for that project. And beginning Littlewood redevelopment with the Castaldi's been done, and we have architectural under contract. The security projects, those are ongoing. They're small dollar amounts really for Raptor repair and replacement parts and computer pieces for the school safety. The last big one is our school improvement projects, or we call them the $50,000 projects, which have been a challenge at times, but we're kind of sunsetting all of those. You can see most, if not all, the funds have been either expended or encumbered, and then those residual balances that have been allocated to schools and haven't been spent will roll back into the general construction pot at the end of the year. And then the last few pages are just purchase orders, and again, this is all stuff this committee has seen many, many times, but just kind of looking at our open purchase orders, how much, what project, what school it's at, and then how much the PO is, how much has been expended, and then the net balance that's available at this time.
Great, thanks, Alex. I had a couple of questions. The first was specific to Westwood, and I don't need an exact figure. What would you say was the all-in cost of the buried fuel tank abatement surprise that we got? I know there was some worry when it was first discovered as to how ugly of a baby it could be, but what it ended up being?
So I think they're still kind of finalizing the change order, and I was talking with Suzanne about that this past week. But you got several costs associated with it. You've got the actual on-site monitoring. We had to bring in GSE, who did the environmental piece. We had to remove all of the contaminants and then ship all the contaminants down to some area where I guess it's okay, or whatever the case is. You're allowed to dump these terrible chemicals there. And then you've got the costs associated with the delay, because we originally were planning to do tilt wall for both buildings, for the main classroom building and the building. So there's some mobilization costs associated with that. I don't have the number in front of me. If I had to guess, I would say probably close to $1 million.
Yes.
Somewhere in that area. And then, the cost to bring the crane, I think we're bringing the crane that we saw that was putting up the tilt wall. That has to come back. It's like $80,000 to move this massive crane. Takes 14 tractor trailers. So there's definitely some unanticipated costs. I think it's around $1 million, but I'll mention that to Suzanne. Maybe we can bring back something final. Yeah.
And then another number that would be interesting, and I know it'll have to be a function of, once you get that migration number of students, that kind of thing. But I know part of the legislative session involved sharing infrastructure dollars, thankfully not this particular bucket because of the way the tax was worded. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was intentionally worded to say board-owned schools.
It's very intentional, the wording, because
some smart people in that room that day, as it turns out. But with regard to the other funds we get through the millage, I believe those are, currently used for some infrastructure and will be shared with potentially charter schools and that kind of thing. That kind of forecasting obviously will be impactful to any conversation of funding for infrastructure going forward.
Without a doubt. So, when we presented the referendum to begin with, we looked at a comprehensive project list, which incorporated, of course, half-cent sales tax funds, also local capital funds, which are, north of 30 million at this point. So the legislation, I don't have the bill of reference and my computer died, but basically the language requires us to share on a per student basis based on COFT, which is the capital outlay FTE, a per student amount to each charter school, and they're kind of phasing it in. So for next year, we have to share 20%, the year after that, 40%, and so on until we get to 100. I'm presenting that, or we'll be presenting that at a workshop next week, and I can certainly follow up with the committee, or if Mr. Andrew can remember, pull that off and send it to you guys. But it's going to have an impact. Is it, it's not necessarily a budget buster, but those, those $1.5 million funds are huge for maintenance. So we've been in this situation when they reduce the 2 mil down to 1.5, where we have this massive backlog of deferred maintenance. And we actually, when you look at the state as a whole, I think that happened in 2009, I want to say, when they changed it from 2 mils to 1.5 mil. And we're actually just now getting back to this current fiscal year, getting back to where, as a state, we're receiving as much as we did back in 2009. And for those of you, and I know we have a lot of industry professionals, our costs have maybe almost doubled since then. So my concern as a CFO is the amount of deferred maintenance that we have accumulated, which is significant. So anything that erodes into that is going to be painful. Luckily, we do have the half-cent sales tax, and we are going through comprehensive rezoning, so I'm hoping we're going to build smart, right? So to avoid some of those costs, but it will have an impact, and we'll certainly share that with the committee.
So for, the committee's reference as the subject will come up down the road, we're going to be in the disappointment business because the funds are not going to go as far, and we can talk about the pandemic, interest rates, inflation, whatever you want. Shouldn't take you long to come up with the examples. But I think it's worth noting that the irony of this tax becoming necessary as a result of school funding being pulled away at the state level, this tax will prove insufficient overall relative to our original aims because that behavior has continued. And this is being recorded, and I'm not ashamed to say that. So it's unfortunate. Any questions of the financial report?
Good report. What is life after the 50,000 like for our schools?
So I would say at this point, we've focused a lot of these dollars on massive redevelopments for very good reason. A lot of times it's cost effective when you're think about mobilization and general conditions to do a lot of things when you're on site. The reality is the $50,000 projects, for the most part, you're getting a new sign and maybe some additional furniture. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon the leadership of the district to prioritize, because as we've talked about in this committee many times, there's a finite number of needs, and we've always had that, whether it's general operating or capital. We have unlimited needs at the district, and we have to be very, very selective with what we're doing. In terms of impacting individual schools, I'm not sure how much just a personal opinion, I'm not sure how much the $50,000 move the meter, but you're going to have to look at the comprehensive needs of the district and really prioritize, because we're not going to have, A, the funds that we anticipated from the beginning, and B, the costs that we projected were woefully low. So any kind of notion that we're going to complete the project list that was originally presented, you can go ahead and throw that out the window. So it's, we've just got to be smart going forward, is what I would say as a district, and build smart. I think the rezoning, Suzanne always says it, form should follow function, and I 100% agree with her on that. I think it's really important to know where we're going so we know where to invest the money. I don't know if that answered your question. But.
All right. The decision to bond what we did when we did it, in retrospect, was ingenious, because we are finding a way to stretch the funds, and it's become an environment where the faster you can get under contract, you're paying today's rate as opposed to tomorrow's rate, which someday it may go down, But that day is really far in the future, I'm guessing. Other questions for Alex? Yes.
One real quick question. I know you guys have probably told us this several times, but I just forget. What is the Phase 2, what's the scope of work of the Phase 2 Westwood Middle School?
So that's mainly the cafeteria area, and that's work that's going to be done there with HVAC and then some of the remodeling. It's after the fact.
Gotcha.
So in essence, what it
That portion of
was.
the school is remaining, then you're going back in and renovating it, basically.
Yes, and part of the thought there was twofold, but one, to get some of that going, but also to have some work for local contractors and subs that weren't included in the first part of it. So although we weren't going with a contract manager, without the CM, I think that was part of the process there. And those are different facilities. The food and nutrition services is currently being used. And so it's one of those summer projects that we could pull out and do some owner direct purchases and stuff like that and really control the prices there. And we'll wait until our next meeting to discuss this, but there is constant revisiting of CM versus hard bid, because even since the last time when we went with the hard bid for Westwood, things have changed again. And so I think there's value in still not just saying we're going to do one thing and run with it for 10 years. I think with the changes, we just have to look at that too. And I'm sure that'll be a discussion in August. We'll make sure we bring that forward. But that is something we're currently evaluating with Harvard Jolly and discussing, hey, what's Littlewood look like? And not just do hard bid because Westwood was hard bid. So not just being stuck in that model, so y'all know.
I was going to ask, and I'm not trying to be funny, but like at some point, we're going to study that there was no underground fuel tank at the Littlewood campus, right? Like, we're going to go way back into the Wayback Machine.
Well, right. And yeah, that's part of the discussion. That's what made us rethink this. So yes.
Not make the same mistake twice. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Just discussions with facility staff, we're talking about ground penetrating radar, because there are, there's some subsurface stuff that maybe gets included in, modifications of the architecture documents, and some doesn't. This one was buried. So, but I think the GPR is key, and I think that's certainly, in my opinion, worth the investment. So you kind of know on the front end.
I just want to ask another follow-up question. So I think it's a good idea, especially when you have something like the food services, whatever, where you can make under direct purchases and vendor hires. Do you have certain things in your construction portfolio that you just hire direct to the vendor, you skip the construction manager? For example, at UF, we hire the abatement guy. We don't go through a contractor, skip all that markup and stuff. Do you have identified services or things where you say, we don't need that in the project, we're just going to hire direct to save those funds, that we manage it ourselves? I'm just curious. I'm not saying do it, I'm just asking.
It seems like we have that on a smaller scale, but like not when we're going in.
Projects.
Yes. So like with Westwood, I'm sure they went with the abatement of the old cafeteria and some of those that we knew had asbestos in them. So I don't know on any of our larger projects that we've pulled that out.
I hate these things. We'll talk about these things next. Anything else for Alex? Okay. Does anybody have any general discussion items other than, we're not doing these microphones again unless we're getting recorded, right? Okay, good talk. Nothing? Okay. You'll see on here our next meeting date is August the 28th. Hopefully we have no infrastructure emergencies in the interim, but appreciate everybody being here. Look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for your time and service. We are adjourned.